In today's video, I want to define mental health and emotional health. I also want to provide some examples of what I consider to be healthier versus less healthy mental and emotional health, as well as some strategies that I found helpful. If you are enjoying this video, hit the like button, the subscribe button if you want to see more, and of course comments are always welcome. Let's start with mental health. So before I begin, I would ask that you hit the pause button and think, what is mental health to you? We throw around this term all the time, mental health, and I started asking people, can you define mental health? What do you mean by mental health? And I've gotten so many different answers that I wanted to make a video about this. And so I encourage you to hit the pause button and think, what is mental health to me? And what are examples of good versus poor mental health? All right, so hopefully you hit the pause button to do that exercise. So my own personal definition of mental health is simply your thoughts. We have the technology right now of voice to text. We can take our cell phone and we can talk into it and it can turn that into text. What if we could do that with our thoughts? So what if there was some device that could take our thoughts and put them down as text? And so at the end of each day, you could review all the thoughts that you had, and you could maybe decide, oh, look at this thought. Is this contributing to a life that I want to be experiencing? And you can do that for all your thoughts. And maybe it's a yes sometimes and maybe a no sometimes. If on average, your thoughts that you're having moment to moment are contributing to a life you want to have, then I would say that's probably a sign you're mentally healthy. If on average, you're thinking, oh, these thoughts are actually creating a life experience I don't want, well, guess what? You're probably creating that experience in your real life. And so maybe your mental health, maybe there's room for improvement there. My own personal example is when I first started tuning into my thoughts and trying to capture, like, what am I thinking about? And what I found was that I was having arguments with my father in my head a lot. So I would check in and sometimes I'd be thinking about whatever, but a recurring theme is I would be having arguments with my dad in my head. Number one, this is super unfair. It's not like my father was saying those things. I was saying those things to myself, so it's not at all fair to my dad that I'm implicating him somehow. But also, I'm probably manifesting or creating. I'm creating that life. So I'm basically rehearsing arguments where I'm defending myself and people are attacking me. So of course, in regular life, I'm going to perceive someone as attacking me, and I've already rehearsed all my defenses. So I start defending myself. And so I am creating this life that I don't really want with those thoughts. And a strategy that worked for me was, it wasn't enough for me to just recognize, okay, I'm having these thoughts I don't want, so I need to just let them go. Because I'd check in, a minute later, and sure enough, those thoughts would be back in my head. So a strategy that worked for me was to figure out, well, what do I want to be thinking about? What are the important things in my life that I want to create more of? What do I want to create? And so then when I would catch myself having an argument with my dad in my head, I'd think, oh, this is an opportunity for me to create, or this is an opportunity for me to put a thought in my head that I actually want. So that strategy was something I appreciated. Emotional health is quite different for me. So I want to give you a moment to think of, what is emotional health to you, or how would you define emotional health, and what are some examples of good versus poor emotional health. So go ahead and hit the pause button and go ahead and do that. So hopefully you took some time to think about it. I've asked a lot of people this question, and about half the people I ask focus on the emotions themselves. And they say, oh, your emotional state is your emotional health. What emotions you're experiencing. So if you're experiencing anger a lot or sadness a lot, that means you have poor emotional health. And if you're experiencing joy and happiness a lot, it means you have good emotional health. And I fully disagree with this. I think emotional health is how you respond to your emotions and what's your relationship to your emotions once you have them. So to me, there's a huge distinction. And the reason I have this distinction is because as a human, if you live long enough, you're going to experience all the human emotions, and you're going to experiencing them in varying degrees of intensity. So I think emotions are a part of our experience, and then how we respond to them is pretty important. Tony Robbins is a motivational speaker. He is trying to motivate people to change their lives for the better. And he talks about what he calls negative emotions, like your sadness, your frustration, anger, loneliness. He calls those negative emotions. And he says, actually, these are action feelings. They're feelings to get you to do an action. And I'm not trying to sell you on Tony Robbins, because I'm going to get to a point where I think he's missing something. So he gives two responses to these so-called action feelings or negative emotions. The first is your response inappropriate? So let's say that someone gives you some feedback and it's basically criticism, and you immediately get angry. Tony Robbins would suggest in that situation, if your anger is unjustified, you just got angry because you felt criticized, but the criticism itself is really helpful and this person's going out on a limb to help you, then Tony Robbins would say, well, you need to check in and make sure that you change yourself, you change your perception in that situation, and you realize, oh, anger was an unjustified emotion. So I need to change my perception and recognize that criticism or feedback that I find critical of me is a helpful thing. And so he's saying, change yourself. Or the second response Tony Robbins suggests is, if your feeling is justified, then change the world until you don't feel it anymore. So let's say the criticism makes you upset and the criticism is based on slander, or the criticism contained slander, or the criticism contained hurtful lies to you. They were lying to other people about you, and so you're angry. Well, Tony Robbins would say, well, then you need to change the situation. So you need to discuss with the people that person talked to. You need to make sure that everyone knows, hey, this is slander, these are hurtful lies. And so you're changing the situation, you're changing the people and the circumstances. And then you're no longer feeling the feeling. So in both Tony Robbins' cases, you're either changing your internal perception so that you don't feel the emotion, or you're changing the world around you so you don't feel the emotion. The genius here is that Tony Robbins is trying to get you to change yourself, and then he's saying, hey, anytime you feel these certain feelings, you either change yourself or change the world around you. Guess what? There's so many opportunities for change, because you're gonna feel these feelings no matter what. You can't go through life and miss out on these feelings. They're gonna be a part of your experience. So where I think Tony Robbins is missing the boat a little bit is a third option, which is to allow yourself to feel the emotion. And you can dump the judgment and you can dump the thoughts that are getting you to feel that feeling, and you can allow yourself to feel it and connect your feelings to the present moment, whatever's happening around you right now. So, of course, if a lion is attacking you, this is not a good strategy. Don't just feel your feelings. If a lion's attacking you and you're scared and you get adrenaline, you run away. So I'm not saying always feel your feelings. I'm just saying there are situations where it's okay to. So if someone writes an email and you're immediately flushed with all this feeling, there's no immediate challenge around you. You've got all the time in the world to reply to the email. You don't have to respond right away. So you can allow yourself to feel that feeling, and you can let the thoughts go. Don't even think about the email, and try to tune in to what's going on in your body. So let me give an example. Let's say you're feeling lonely, and an immediate reaction is, oh, I don't want to feel lonely, so I'm going to call up a friend. Well, another option is to just allow yourself to feel that loneliness. And instead of the thoughts that are driving that feeling, you let those go. And what is lonely to you? For me, I kind of feel cavernous or hollow, and I feel larger, and I feel kind of wonky, like I'm light. And to me, there's nothing really harmful about those feelings. They're just feelings. And then I can connect those to my immediate surroundings, which might be just me in a living room or me on a hike or something. I'm going to connect that experience to those feelings. And what I'm doing by connecting that feeling to my immediate present moment is I'm giving myself a richer, more complex relationship to that feeling. And I'm responding to that feeling by allowing myself to be present and in this moment, and I don't have to force myself to change. So I'd say Tony Robbins' responses of change yourself or change the world around you, wonderful for change, wonderful for creating a different life, but perhaps tedious if you're doing it every day and maybe you like your life. Maybe you want your life to be the way it is that day and you don't need change all the time. So I would add this third option, which is there are times where it's appropriate to just allow yourself to feel the feeling. And one interesting thing about allowing myself to feel feelings is I feel them for such a brief time. So that loneliness I just gave as an example, if I allow myself to truly feel lonely, it lasts maybe 90 seconds at most, and then it'll often morph into another feeling. A lot of people report about sadness and joy, so if you allow yourself to truly just feel sad and raw, often there's some ecstatic joy that it morphs into, and quite the opposite too. Sometimes people feel such joy when they're remembering some part of their life, and then they end up weeping because they're sad that they've lost that part of their life. So emotions, as you experience them, they morph into other emotions. And Anthony Bourdain said something to the effect of, I want to feel all the feelings, and I want to feel them at all the levels of intensity. Because guess what? We are human, and we're going to feel all of the human emotions. So why not feel them fully to different levels of intensity? Trying to live a life where you just are always avoiding feelings, I think would be rather tedious. Certainly effective for change. If every time you feel certain feelings, you have to change either yourself or the world around you. To me, the third option of allowing yourself to have a new relationship or a more complex relationship to that feeling by feeling it is very helpful. Some examples of kind of unhealthy emotional responses are if you react immediately all the time. So let's say every time you get angry, you just start thinking, well, who's at fault? So of course there are some situations where reacting immediately is totally healthy. But if that's your go-to every time, maybe add some more elements, some more responses to anger in. If you are always avoiding feelings, I think that's pretty unhealthy. For example, loneliness is a part of everyone's life, and some people really dislike feeling lonely that they always avoid it. So anytime they get even an inkling of loneliness, they're like, oh my gosh, I need to change the situation. And I don't know how healthy that is, because you're never really developing a connection to that feeling. You're always just avoiding it. And there's nothing inherently wrong with feeling a feeling. And there's certainly exceptions. Like I said, if a tiger is attacking you, you've got to respond immediately. So our situations where responding immediately makes sense. Or avoiding. If someone is angry at you and it causes you to feel a certain way, and they're a toxic person and they're always criticizing you, but in unhealthy and unhelpful ways, avoiding them is totally fine. Or avoiding the feelings you have when they're talking to you, and by getting out of there, that's totally fine. But if these are your only responses, then I would say that's somewhat unhealthy. One I already talked about a little bit that I love that Tony Robbins points out. So if you feel a negative feeling, some people just assume the circumstances that caused it are automatically bad. So in my example, for my case, if someone was angry with me, it caused me to feel feelings I didn't like. So I always assumed it was bad that they were angry with me. So I always assumed that circumstance was bad, and so I'd try to change it. I would try to talk them out of being angry with me, or I would try to get away from them, or I would try to some way to manage their feelings. But something I didn't do was recognize, well, maybe it's okay that they're angry with me. Maybe it's not a big deal. That was certainly not something I was capable of for a long time. Tony Robbins says, just because the circumstances caused you to feel a certain way, the first question you should ask, well, is my feeling appropriate to those circumstances? And I think that's fairly healthy. Is, okay, I'm feeling this way and I don't like to feel this way, but what caused me to feel this way is not necessarily bad. Maybe it is, but maybe it isn't. And the final example of what I think is poor emotional health is to use your uncomfortable feelings as an excuse to harm others. Of course, I've seen this so much, and I don't mean harm, just physical harm. There's so many ways to harm somebody, like an adult yelling at a child, not realizing how that might impact the child. So when you're angry, it doesn't give you a license to go hurt other people in whatever way you want. So I think recognizing that, oh, I'm in a heightened emotional state and I'm fragile right now, maybe this isn't the best time for me to go around interacting with humans. An example I think of is like an adult who is like super upset. Maybe that's not the best time to discipline your child. Maybe figure out, navigate that emotion a little bit before you start disciplining, unless you're able to navigate that heightened emotional state while disciplining your child well. That's great, but that's certainly a danger zone. So that's my take on mental health and emotional health. Would love your comments. Thanks again for watching. Hit the like button if you like this video. The subscribe button will let you tune into more videos like this around well-being. And have a great day.